Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about the Randall's Island shelter in New York City. Now, you guys will remember, if you pay attention to this channel, that we've actually covered this a couple of times on this channel, this specific shelter, and we've covered stabbings that have occurred at the particular Randall's Island shelter. And yes, in fact, there was a stabbing very recently. I believe last week it actually occurred, but today we're not actually talking about that because surrounding this shelter, there's actually a migrant encampment, and this is due to the fact, because we have limited shelter space, that migrants who don't have families are evicted from the shelter and they have to reapply in order to get into the system after 30 days, and the same rule applies for migrant families. They just have to reapply after 60 days. Well, because of that, these people have decided that they're going to set up camp on the island with a bunch of different cars, and the NYPD has decided to clear out said encampment. But what I find fascinating that's not really being talked about is the video of this actually happening, because this was reported by the media to have been a pretty easy clearing out of an encampment. It was basically without incident, but what you see on the video for yourself is absolutely fascinating when you think about these poor innocent angels, these sad sacks that need the help of our tax dollars, because they got a lot of nice stuff. They got a lot of expensive property, and I think that is incredibly notable. Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
Breaking news, the NYPD right now dismantling an encampment on Randall's Island. Now, earlier today, they confiscated and removed several vehicles. This comes as Mayor Adams has promised to crack down on issues near a migrant shelter there.
So like I said in the opening, they cracked down on this migrant encampment on Randall's Island, which is in and around the Randall's Island shelter, which is notorious for violent instances. But if you look at the B-roll over the shoulder of this local newswoman, what you'll see is that they're removing an Audi, an older, not very nice car, if we're being perfectly honest, what appears to be a Mazda CX-5, which is actually a pretty nice SUV, although not a luxury SUV, and then there's footage of them removing what may be the original Audi or a different brand new looking Audi. Again, these are very expensive cars. I'm actually a successful YouTuber on the internet.com. I recently got my Honda Accord stolen, and I made videos about that, and then I got a big insurance check in order to cover the purchase of a new car or a used car, because I don't buy new cars, and I didn't buy an Audi. I have a car that is significantly lower in terms of price point than an Audi as of right now, as a replacement for my Accord. But these illegal migrants that are living off of, in part, my tax dollars somehow can afford these cars. Very interesting. Let's continue.
Well, let me tell you, just about a half hour ago, if you were here watching this whole thing, you would have had no idea this was going to happen. It was as if a storm rolled through. I want to just paint the picture here for you. This is the shelter itself here at Randall's Island. You can see some migrants now who are hanging out outside after both the NYPD and Parks Department police came through at about 3:45 and scattered everybody. And if we shift over here, you're looking at what really is an empty space, but this was full of people earlier, vendors, folks hanging out, folks living, and it was largely a non-contested removal and breaking down, really dismantling of all of it.
So as you can see right here, they're at the Randall's Island site. They show you how close the actual shelter was to this encampment, and when you look at the encampment, what you can see is the remains of what appears to be a tent, but all of the different vehicles have been removed. Well, when you cut to the B-roll, you realize exactly how many people were here, how many cars were here, and it's quite interesting.
The sun was barely up before the NYPD tow trucks were out. Wheels were strapped up, allowing only enough time to remove belongings. Police hauling the vehicles away as part of a raid near the Randall's Island migrant shelter.
So again, what I want you guys to do is go beyond the local news coverage and focus on what they're not talking about. Because right here, they just presented to you that at dawn, the NYPD came to bust up this migrant encampment. They towed away a bunch of these brand new looking, sometimes luxury cars or pricey SUVs that don't quite hit the luxury level. And they only gave these people enough time to remove their property from their vehicle, their personal effects, in order for them to, actually have that stuff, because the police didn't want to take that. But then they cut to an image of somebody removing their personal property from the car, and that is clearly a brand new in the box television. Now, call me crazy, call me a conspiracy theorist, go get a tinfoil hat and Photoshop it on my head if need be, but is that not one of the most suspicious things that you could possibly pull out of the back of your vehicle for the NYPD to let you take? Again, these people are supposedly, according to these reports, living in this encampment outside the shelter with a flat screen HD TV in the box of the car that's an unregistered vehicle that also looks like a brand new car. Is that not odd to anybody? Is that not curious? Is that not interesting or compelling? Is maybe, just maybe, it a bit unreasonable for me to assume that that might be a stolen TV that they plan to sell at a later on point? Because I don't believe you could just bring, if you got readmitted to the Randall's Island shelter, that television into said shelter. I would hope that the New York City taxpayer is not giving them free televisions, and it just seems odd that this would be the thing that they would cut to as something non-suspicious, just the NYPD letting them remove their personal items, when in reality, in actuality, this is insanely suspicious. This is insanely odd. This is crazy.
You'll see unregistered cars, mopeds, stolen mopeds.
Chief of Patrol John Schell on Eyewitness News mornings at 10, saying the NYPD often makes these discoveries at Randall's Island.
So what the NYPD representative tells the media is that you often see unregistered vehicles, mopeds, stolen mopeds. I believe he was going to go on to say stolen vehicles as well. And this is something that they tend to discover whenever they examine what's going on in and around these shelters. Now, again, I will ask the question, if you have stolen property at these areas, at these locations, where you have people who, by the way, are committing asylum fraud. They are claiming to be fleeing oppression in their country while taking advantage of the taxpayer in New York City. Why are we not deporting these individuals? Why do we not open up an investigation, examine the reasonable suspicion of this woman having a brand new flat screen TV with nowhere to plug it into,
allowing only enough time to remove belongings
in the back of a car that is not registered to her, that may or may not be stolen, and say, you know what, this possibly, maybe, just maybe, might be cause for an alarm. Maybe, just maybe, this might be something that we would want to look into, that we would want to investigate. It's all fine and dandy to tow away the unregistered vehicles and to impound the stolen mopeds and all of that, but isn't it a bit odd that there is additional possibly stolen property that doesn't line up with the situation that these illegal immigrants are presenting themselves as being in, which is, again, seeking asylum, freedom from oppression and whatnot, that we can be alarmed about.
But asserting that his cops remain focused on enforcing the law, not singling anyone out.
We don't care about your status. We're here to fight crime, whoever you may be, wherever you hang out, wherever you live.
So look, I understand what the NYPD spokesman is trying to say right here. They're not targeting them because they're illegal immigrants or anything like that. And again, they're not honing in on them because of their status. The issue is that they're committing crimes, and that's what the NYPD wants to go out after and prosecute, or at least confiscate property, not make any arrests really, and then refer them when they do make arrests to prosecutors who won't prosecute. But the fact of the matter is, the status does matter. We already have enough criminals in the United States of America, enough criminals in New York City. We don't need to be subsidizing new people that are engaged in new types of criminality.
Right now, some migrants appear to be living right outside the shelter doors on Randall's Island. You'll find a makeshift barbershop, food stands, and police posted close to this big encampment. The Adams administration has said it will not tolerate encampments outside the shelter, just as it wouldn't on city streets.
Now, I also want to point out that Eric Adams' position to the public is we're not going to tolerate these encampments outside of these migrant shelters. We're not going to tolerate them on the streets of New York City, as you see police officers in and around this area watching what is going on at these encampments. And as we pointed out, there's already been multiple violent instances in the Randall's Island shelter itself, which is where things are to be provided for these illegal migrants. But the fact of the matter is, if you're just not enforcing the law to the point where these people feel comfortable camping out and setting up their own businesses, bringing stolen property there, then you kind of get what you're paying for. You're getting what you're actually allowing, whether or not you're stating that you're allowing it. So I am happy that the NYPD busted this up. I'm happy that they towed away some of these vehicles. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have accompanying arrests, and by the way, deportations attached to that, then you're not going to be in a situation where any of this kind of behavior ends up being deterred. And that's really what's going on right here. You're seeing the consequences of tolerating this terrible behavior, of subsidizing it, which makes it even worse, and of protecting it with sanctuary city and sanctuary state laws.
Carlos is here from Ecuador.
I'm waiting to have work authorization and be able to work and get out of here.
He says he's been living in this shelter for a month and understands why some of the migrants are resorting to vending.
I think it's because of that, because they need help. Sometimes we don't have anyone helping us, anyone sending us anything.
Look, the number one takeaway that I want you to get from a bunch of these different migrant stories that I'm talking about is not that it is the fault or it is due to the evils of the migrants themselves. This guy, I'm sure, is a perfectly nice fellow. He's been here for about 30 days in the shelter. He wants a work authorization, and presumably that means he wants to work in the legitimate workforce. But the fact of the matter is, the system draws these people here. The incentive structure is corrupt. That creates problems, and these problems were directly called for by the Biden administration as early as the campaign, when he encouraged these people to surge to the border because that's who we are.
I would in fact make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
We have the vice president, who has been installed as the presidential candidate for 2024, who is in charge of the border, who also, likewise in her campaign, which was a failed campaign, encouraged these people to come to the border, but as the borders are, as the person in charge of that problem, did absolutely nothing, and in fact was in denial that there was even a problem for multiple years into the Biden presidency. So all of these people, in addition to the fact that we have sanctuary city laws and all these different benefits in New York City, were told repeatedly that it would be perfectly fine for them to come here. And the fact of the matter is, when they fraudulently claimed asylum, and again, that wasn't something dealt with at the border, that put them in this scenario where they cannot legally work for 180 days, and the shelter system, due to the fact that it was overwhelmed, ends up only being able to house them for 30 days if they are a single man, and 60 days if they're a family. So yeah, a lot of these corrupt incentives end up pushing these people towards illicit markets in order to make money, but the fact that this guy feels like he is owed something is the consequences of politicians in the United States of America telling him that he is owed something. We need to send these people back. Period, point blank. We do not have a tangible, legitimate border at this moment in time. And if we fast forward these people's work authorizations, that will help these people in the short term, in the immediate moment, but it will show people across the world that all you have to do in order to get the U.S. to bend over backwards for you is flood with enough numbers our southern border under people like Kamala Harris, and eventually you will be given work authorization early as a reward for that bad behavior. So we can't authorize these people to work. We have to boot them out, because you have to think about the incentive structure that you're laying out, because we don't want to have this problem just from a purely practical standpoint of people surging to the border, so much so that they completely overrun our institutions and rob us of our tax dollars. We have stuff to pay for our own citizens. We have problems to deal with for New Yorkers in the city and in the state of New York, and those resources are being deflected to these people who should have never been allowed in the country in the first place, to these people who have been taught to claim asylum as a mechanism to get around the more stringent requirements to be an economic migrant, and we are paying the price for that. But hey, you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I wanted you to look at some of this video for yourself, but I also want to know what you think about this down in the comments below. As usual, if you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the NYPD busting up an illegal migrant encampment. Till next time.